Welcome to Factual America. I'm your host, Matthew Sherwood. This week it is my pleasure to welcome Maiken Baird and Lisa Bryant, co-directors and executive producers of the new Netflix documentary, Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich. Here's the trailer.
You're taught that predators are old men in alleys. You're not told that a friend, a socialite, a woman can be a predator too.
When Epstein was first arrested, it's hard to know why Maxwell was not arrested at the same time.
I met Maxwell and Epstein when I was just 16 years old through my sister, Maria Farmer. We were both abused, and I'm going to be testifying at her trial.
Without Ghislaine's help, Jeffrey Epstein could never have abused
more than 500 victims.
I hope that Maxwell is held accountable for what she's done.
She basically played the role of a madame.
Class can cloud reality. And Ghislaine capitalized on that. She exhibits characteristics of a narcissist.
I believe that she didn't think she was doing anything wrong.
She knew she was going to make these high-powered men happy.
On a scale of shock, she'd be a great wife.
One of the most eagerly anticipated criminal trials.
She fed a monster. You had to kind of be a monster to do it.
That was the trailer for the new Netflix documentary, Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich. And this is Factual America. I'm your host, Matthew Sherwood. Each week I watch a hit documentary and then talk with the filmmakers and their subjects. Disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was one of the most infamous sexual predators, using his money and influence to hide his secret life preying on young girls. But he wasn't alone. Aided by Ghislaine Maxwell, the British socialite and daughter of privilege, who is just as much a monster as Epstein, as revealed in this new Netflix documentary. Join us as we talk with Maiken Baird and Lisa Bryant, co-directors and executive producers, about the bravery of the victims, the challenges of telling this horrible and shocking tale, the ability of the powers that be to cover up the biggest scandal since Watergate, and how Maiken discovered her talents as a voice artist. Stay tuned. Maiken Baird and Lisa Bryant, welcome to Factual America. How are things with you? Lisa, how are you?
Terrific. Thank you so much for having us. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's the honor is ours. And Maiken, how are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. Just to remind our listeners and viewers, we're talking about the film Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich. It's a Netflix feature which premiered in November. So a good welcome again and hearty congratulations on your film. And I checked today; it's doing quite well, at least here in the UK. I think it's still top 5. So I know it's proven to be quite popular. May seem obvious given the title, but Maiken, we usually start off here with asking the directors or the filmmakers, what is their film about? What is Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich all about? Maybe you can give us a synopsis.
The film Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich is really about a woman who had a very privileged background from the UK and who somehow managed to get herself into this world of, very rich and sort of dark, seedy underbelly world in New York. And I was just very curious as to how that happened. How did she get into that from this very elite English kind of world? Why would she, get into that? And that's really what the film is about, is why she got into it, what happened, the trial, and where she is now.
Mm. And Lisa, why now? What are you hoping to add to the story? I mean, superficially, I would say some might think there's not much more to say. I know you've been involved with the story for a while. I've certainly seen your work looking at this subject previous to this. For transparency's sake, we've had another Ghislaine Maxwell doc here on the podcast almost exactly a year ago. So what was it that you were hoping to add to this to the story?
Well, what I think so unique and so different from Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich, is this is a woman. He didn't act alone. It was very obvious. There were many other people, but, he was the head, but she was the number two, almost one and one, if you will, because he couldn't operate alone. So we wanted to explore this female angle that is so crazy and the psychological aspects of that. And, I think throughout the film, you'll see that, the people we spoke with, the women in particular, feel like Ghislaine was in many cases worse than Jeffrey, because this is a woman that they trusted. She groomed them, became their friend, and whatever they needed to have or to hear from her, she would do that, and she would gain their trust and, entrap them that way. So to try to unravel and unpeel that onion of her and how she could do that, why she could do that, what her motivations were, the psychology behind that, we felt was fascinating, and we did a little differently, I think, than some of the others we tried to, by gaining inside access through one of the testifying victims, Annie Farmer, who so bravely came forward, and we had some privileged access with her and her attorney. So, that was a little bit different, and we just hope to bring out some of those things, and the women feel very strongly, about her and about her being a woman and feeling really betrayed by that.
I think that's a very important point, and may I add, I don't usually editorialize here, but as someone who's watched a lot of these, I think that is the big difference, and the voice of the victims coming through loud and clear. And I guess, Maiken, as I said, we've discussed Ghislaine Maxwell previously on this podcast, so maybe we won't go into all the details of how she got into this world and what was driving her, but I wouldn't say that other films have been sympathetic, but it does seem to me that this is a little more, it seems like we get more evidence in terms of what, the world she was sort of occupying, and actually not so much that, but what she did in terms of, and hearing it straight from the victims. I think that's, and I guess that was the main focus, wasn't it?
You never know once you get into these films what you're going to find.
Right.
She could have been a victim, of Jeffrey Epstein, but this is actually not what happened, is not what we found in our research and all of the reporting that we did on this story. We found that she was actually a predator, and a scary one. Somebody who, and because it was very not clear that she was a predator. She didn't look like, sort of quote unquote look like one, right? Right. So, this is a very important story to tell and to see, is that for people out there that really, like, there are women who are walking around who are predators, but who actually come across as something totally different. So that, I think we really tried to dig into. So that was important.
Okay. And I wanted to add that I think our trailer did a very good job of taking that point of view of, he was a monster and she was too. And really kind of unraveling that monster behind the monster it was really what we set out to let people kind of think about. And, we don't want to spoon feed them their, the story, but at the same time, you want it to be thought provoking. And that's the conclusion that we came to. And I think the trailer did a good job of making people want to watch that.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I think, I guess that makes, like you said, Maiken, she could have been a victim. You didn't, you went in with fresh eyes and looking at this, but I guess it makes it even scarier in that way. I guess the victims have told you that too, that you've got two monsters working together. And Lisa, what maybe, because where we were a year ago when we this podcast looked at this the first time, it was the trial. We were right in the middle of the trial, and it was front page news, certainly here in the UK, I'm sure in the US, and certainly on all the news channels. And what we sensed was that the result was the verdict was looking very much in doubt in terms of where things were going. Did you, as you were filming this, did you have a sense of that? And I guess justice prevailed in the end, but were you surprised? And if not, why not? How was that whole period?
It was very interesting. I think it was up and down. After a survivor would testify, you would kind of feel like, wow, she did really great. But then you'd have this cross-examination, and they just went after him. I think the attorneys for Maxwell did a fairly good job at poking holes in stories in certain cases, but at the same time, I guess I felt a little bit more that she probably was going to be convicted, but there certainly was doubt because of certain, holes here and there. But you had to, every day, it was fascinating. Mike and I were both sitting there. I mean, you could hear a pin drop because everything is just so, crazy for one thing. And it's really just very interesting how the whole, operation worked. And no matter if it was the pilot testifying about flying them around the world, or if it was, the travel agent who was talking about, who booked the plane tickets. It really was some, and then of course, when the women spoke, it was, jaw-dropping testimony. These are 14-year-old children talking about, what a grown woman, had allegedly done to them, and many years ago. So I think the longer the jury was out, though, I think the more nervous everybody became because several things. We also had COVID going on, and COVID was rapidly, there was a new strain, and we thought, oh my gosh, they're going to have a mistrial because they're going to lose all the jurors. And so that was kind of a nail biter too, but it did take a little bit longer than I thought to come to a verdict, whatever that was going to be. So did you feel the same way, Maiken? It was a little nerve wracking.
Yeah, it was, because there could have been a mistrial,
Right.
and it was a nail biter, and it was also between Christmas and New Year or something. So it was just nobody was there. They felt like the newspapers had sent their kind of stringers. It was just really it was a bleak time for sure.
But what I think, and you're talking about the content of the trial, what I think the key points that the jury probably could not get past is the fact that these women who testified nobody knew each other. They were from different time periods. And, they didn't talk, they didn't know each other. And the stories at the root of it were really all the same. They all had to deal with grooming, massage, manipulation, abuse. And sometimes abuse by Ghislaine herself. So at the heart of it all, I think the jury saw that there was, culpability there. And I think, maybe you had a holdout juror who was giving the benefit of the doubt in one case. And, I think that always happens. But I think that's probably what pushed it over the edge is that, look, these people didn't know each other. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. I mean, I think you also raise a good point that, all these women are who testified in this trial and in others are all very brave and for coming forward. But one thing that came up even when we were last talked about this here was that, there's just the testimony of Annie Farmer, who was, from what we were gathering then, is just what she said or trying to tell people when she was, way back when they were trying to get the story out and tell people what was happening to them. It's never changed. It's through all these years, it's been extremely consistent. And maybe she is obviously, you were, you spent a lot of time with her, and maybe can you say something about Annie Farmer and your experience working with her and on this doc and what she, basically her bravery and strength in going through all this, and maybe I guess that would be what would you say about that?
I don't know, Maiken, do you want to speak to her strength, and I can speak to her maybe more on a personal level? I feel like I know her better because I've known her longer. But if you want to speak to just her bravery and her persistence over the years, I think that's a good thing for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that she came out, and so did her sister, obviously, back then in the early 90s, which is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And, and they just continued, and they were pursued and kind of, sort of chased and all kinds of things, and they continued with the same story. And then what happened here, but it was that long ago, and it just shows you how long it takes, and just with the bravery that they've showed. Yeah, it's incredible. It's really incredible.
And I think Annie, knowing her for now like 4 years and knowing her sister, besides the fact that they have tried and tried, Annie is what I call, if you would, kind of the perfect victim, or the very unconventional victim. She was not from, a poor background. She was not abused as a child. She wasn't from the trailer park. She's somebody who, is just so far out of the realm of what most of the victims have looked like. And so for her, she has really, worked hard on, building herself back up. She is a psychologist now, and she's, really wants to speak out, and her bravery is in wanting to really help others. And she's using, I think through the Netflix platform, she's really trying to encourage others to do the same. So she's really become a role model, I think, certainly of, those that testified. Again, her story is solid as a rock. Not that the others, there were some holes in some stories, but I think it's the fact that they were so young and had so much abuse. Annie was one time, never went back, and didn't have all those other issues. So I think, she really is done a tremendous job at keeping her life on the right path. And, she still works on herself, and even though she is a therapist, and she, feels strongly now to use that to help, others however she can. So she's a tremendous role model and a wonderful person. So can't say enough good things about her.
And I think, just to stress here that, again, we are talking about the victims. They were, most of them, 14, 15, 16 years old at the time, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Annie was 16. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that takes us to a good point to maybe have a early break for our listeners. So we'll be right back with Maiken Baird and Lisa Bryant, co-directors of Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich, a Netflix documentary which premiered last month. This is December 1st on Netflix. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Factual America. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Alamo Pictures to keep up to date with new releases or upcoming shows. Check out the show notes to learn more about the program, our guests, and the team behind the production. Now back to Factual America. Welcome back to Factual America. I'm here with Maiken Baird and Lisa Bryant, co-directors of Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich, Netflix documentary. Lisa, we were just actually talking with both of you, but just about the obviously the trial and the victims. And I know you did you were a producer on the Jeffrey Epstein Filthy Rich docuseries. Was a Ghislaine Maxwell doc always part of the plan?
I think it always cried out for that. She was a portion of that. That was a docuseries, so that was 4 parts. And her story, I think that the Epstein story, I guess, at that time was so shocking. We began that film or that series before he was even a thing. He was alive when we started that, and it was about 8 months in when all of a sudden there's heat on him. Is he going to be arrested? He's arrested, and then he died. So there was a lot of pivoting, and it was a crazy time. And this was no cakewalk either. And as Maiken will attest to, it was so difficult in both, series to get people to talk, because even though they're all over pictures, seen with them and the flight logs and this, that, and the other, they never met him, don't know why their name is there, don't want to talk about it, just absolutely want nothing to do with the story. And so it was extremely difficult. And this one, I think, and Maiken, you can really address this. I think in booking people and trying to get people to talk, probably was even a bit harder. I think it was easier with the women, perhaps this go around, because they lived in fear of him, who was still alive, and her. But this time, there's a lot of competition in the documentary space, and I'm sure you can speak to that, and how hard it made our jobs to do that. But yes, to answer your original question, I think it always did cry out for one. We kind of immediately began plans to do that, and you know, enacted on it. It took a while because of the length of the trial and then the push of the delay and all that. But Maiken, what do you think about how difficult it was? I think you were really surprised, right?
I mean, I would say it was just absolutely impossible to get people to talk who had known her, you know, many of whom I know personally from my life, who really wouldn't speak to me for a while. And basically they spoke off the record, a lot of them, but they did not want to go on camera ever. I mean, it was really, because being associated with a woman who's been sex trafficking minor girls is just not something that anyone wants.
Yeah, so incredibly difficult. Yeah.
No, but, you know, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, no, I mean, but the thing is, what I will say is, because I've seen the Jeffrey Epstein docuseries. I've seen, obviously, this other Ghislaine Maxwell doc that we've had on. There are, I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it. There are some people who I don't know what they do outside of their time being interviewed for some of these docs, right? I mean, let's face it. But I will say some of them, I mean, maybe may not remember it correctly, but some of them seem to go a little bit further. Maybe their memories were a little bit better this time around. I don't know. Maybe it is because Jeffrey's. Well, I think you dug deeper. I think it was something, because everyone was, well, we kind of heard rumors. No, I remember hearing so-and-so saying this and this, you know, kind of, it did.
Listen, thank God for those people is all I can say.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is I mean, I think each documentary has its, you know, pluses and all of that, and new people or people you haven't heard from. But I think we did have, you know, a couple of really unique people, like Petronella Wyatt, for example, who knew her father and knew him him and her from a very young age, and associated with him. And then, you know, this interior decorator that Ghislaine used, who was very fascinating, who not at all, you know, embarrassed or ashamed to admit, you know, he wasn't somebody that you saw everywhere.
That's true.
As you know, and then I think what also kind of set our documentary apart, at least when I watched everything, is that we had the therapist who treats many of the survivors still to this day. What started with them, and I think she has a fantastic insight into these women, and you know, she's really organic to this particular story. She's not just a generic person who can talk about abuse and how it affects women. She really knows how it affected these particular women, you know, or this group of women, not necessarily those women in this film, but so I think again, each one has something to offer, but as Maiken knows, you know, the people that you're talking about, they did know her, but her best friends now wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole, and that's who I think Maiken was referring to.
Yeah, and I think, but Maiken, I mean, you said if you'd known how difficult it was going to be, maybe you would have said no. How did you get involved with this project?
Well, I did know her a bit.
Okay.
We were not friends, but I've met her. You know, we have a lot of friends in common. But also, I was very, very interested in how a woman who was, you know, from a very privileged background with a very good education, why she would choose this route for herself. I really was. I was really, really interested in that. And so when I was approached by the team who had done Filthy Rich, Jeffrey Epstein, I was immediately really interested, because I just thought it was a great, great story, as did many, many other people, as it turns out, which is why it was difficult. The hardest thing about making this film was just how many other people were making this film.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and podcasts and films, because it was such a great story. It is such an incredible story. You know, so that was confirmed by everyone else thinking it was a great story and wanting to do the story. So that was the toughest part, I think, really, honestly. It was just so many people not wanting to talk for obvious reasons. And then just, you know, but I think we still did a pretty good job. And I think we did get some really interesting people who said, you know, some great things. But it was, harder than you would expect because of just so many other films being done, and the topic being a topic that nobody wants to be associated with.
Right.
Of course not.
And in the Jeffrey Epstein one, I was saying how difficult it was, but you know what? We were the only game in town because nobody would touch it, because that is the story. That's the real story. Power and privilege. Even all the networks and people like that did not want to touch this. They're worried about lawsuits. Oh, well, he knew Clinton. Well, what if we need to interview President Clinton someday? What if we need to interview Harry and Meghan? As we know, ABC killed their story that they were going to do and could have exposed him 5 years ago. Fortunately, it's out, it's done now, but it went on for far too long. And thus, anyway, both shows were so difficult to do. And I wasn't surprised. And Maiken kept saying, like, I can't believe this. I can't believe how hard. I was like, I really wasn't that surprised. So it wasn't like, oh, you're failing in getting these people. I knew that it would be extremely difficult. And just getting one or two is a huge win. You know what I mean? It's just because the story is what it is. And there's a lot of stigma attached to him, her, anyone, in that world.
Well, there's also the story of, like, some people did say yes, but then they go back to their homes and they tell their son or their daughter or whatever, oh, I'm doing this thing. And their families are like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, horrified and back out.
Yeah.
So it was challenge. That's for sure.
I mean, it's not something you raised just a few minutes ago, Maiken, but yeah, it was a great story. A lot of people are trying to tell it. As filmmakers, do you worry about such things, or do you just say, no, we know what we're trying to do, and we have the way we're going to tell this story, and you just go on. You don't let that be a factor, or do you kind of do wonder what are others doing? How do you approach that?
We're obviously always worried about what everyone else is doing. Of course we are. But the truth is, we did feel we had a very strong team of people making this. And we had Netflix, which is a very, very big distribution platform. So we had some advantages baked in, I think. And so I wasn't as worried about it as I might have been, but it was definitely made it very, very difficult to get the additional difficulty of getting interesting people because so many other people were going after everyone the same.
But on our side, I want to add that, but I think on our side, and I feel thankful because I hear it time and time again from the survivors, and I've heard it from the survivors who were in this, is that they really feel like in the first series, the way that we treated the women with such respect, they weren't hesitant to tell their stories. Yes, that he was dead, they weren't as fearful, but to still tell their story for the first time, such as a couple of the women, that were in the Maxwell story. I think it's a testament to them trusting us to treat them properly and not to exploit them and make it feel gross and icky and all the things that it is. So we're proud of that and happy that they're happy and with how their stories have been told.
I mean, this other thing we're also just talking about these people who don't want to talk, and for various reasons. We're not saying anything about why they don't want to talk, but it's that's what comes out in all these, is that there's this circle of, it wasn't just Epstein, right? I mean, there were loads of individuals, I'm assuming almost all men, involved in this, and that seems like that's the sort of next piece of the puzzle that really needs to be tackled. Do you think? Would you agree? And do you see anything afoot to go? I mean, you do mention you do talk about Prince Andrew, obviously in the doc. That's one thing that's been happened in the last year. But I mean, how do you feel about that?
I mean, to me, the biggest story since Watergate is this story of all of those people and all of that and all of those people who run the world, and the sort of widespread, the reach of this thing was astounding. This sex trafficking operation, the amount of people who were involved, women and men, who saw it and who looked the other way everywhere. I mean, not just in America, not just Palm Beach, you know, like everywhere, is incredible, incredible. And yeah, that story has not been told. And it's the Washington Post, the New York Times. I don't know what all those people are doing, but they should be out there investigating this and getting all of those men should be held to accountable. I mean, really.
Yeah, well, I will add that having been on this a little bit longer, sadly, and it's completely wrong. I don't think, you know, the big, you know, some things that I've read, you know, about all of the docs is where are the names? Where are the names? It's like, you know what? We know the names. Everybody kind of knows the names, but nobody can really publicly say these names because there's really no picture. There's no solid proof. And there's a huge cover up. We know there's a huge cover up. But who's at the head of the cover up? Well, that's a little muddy because it's been covered up. So I don't think the story will ever really be told fully because of that very reason. So yes, it's absolutely really the root of the story, but you know, it's very difficult as the New York Times, as a Washington Post, as a Netflix, as an anyone to mention names. I mean, in the first Filthy Rich, we mentioned Clinton, Prince Andrew, you know, Dershowitz, and all of these things that you're able to, you know, that there's a story there that's been widely reported, or there's some sort of, you know, corroboration to whatever it is that you're talking about. But it's very, very difficult to, you know, these are very, very powerful people, and people just aren't able to do that without ruining having their own lives ruined by lawsuits and things that you just can't, you know, win against, you know, these powerful people. And it's sad, but that is, you know, really the story of power and privilege, how it wins and how it is won out. And I think it's very, very high levels of government that are covering up a lot of this.
Yeah. And then I think, and then things happen. I mean, not to go down this rabbit hole, but the way Epstein obviously died, I mean, because it's such a cover-up, it's just got everyone in the world just thinking the obvious, you know, whether it's true or not, or maybe it isn't. Maybe there's a good chance it isn't true, but you know, what are people supposed to think, you know? Because the average person who's given any kind of notice to this story thinks, well, yeah, obviously there's more to this, you know? Okay. One more question. So do you want to shut this down, Allison, or what, you can unmute yourself. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So before you, okay, well then why don't we, that's fine. I was about to come to an end. If it can be more than one question, but just maybe a couple more minutes. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, fine. So, okay. Give a little pause so we can edit this. So Maiken, you're one of the cast as well. Was that how did that come about?
It's a really good question. I was at the trial every day, including before, when they were doing the jury selection. So I spent a lot of time, observing the whole legal procedure inside the courtroom. And I really found Bobby Sternum just an incredible character. So I guess I kind of morphed into her voice. I think I wanted to find someone who was actually does this for a living and who could do it, but I just felt like I had it better because I had seen it and heard it every day so much, her whole shtick. And it was just so ingrained in me. And I just felt like I felt compelled because I'm really not interested in being an actress or anything like that.
And she has a great deep voice. Obviously, I could portray the 16-year-old girl. My voice is a little, but Maiken has a very commanding, voice. Yeah. So we liked her, but we had people read for it, but we liked Maiken's the best. So we just went with that. It's funny that you would notice that. And that's not a big point, I think.
Yeah, I know, it's like
the podcast, but
it was just scrolling down. I was like, wait a minute. I didn't realize that was Maiken doing that voice.
I felt like I channeled her a bit. I channeled her having seen Monster so much.
You did. So it's hard to believe, but we're actually coming to the end of our time together. And I just have what we usually do at the very end is just ask you what's next for you. So, Lisa, what's next? Does Filthy Rich carry on? Is it or is there? Because it's always filth, what do you have on your plate?
I think Filthy Rich probably is done, but you never say never. I mean, you just never know what's going to happen in this story. So I would never say never for sure. I don't want to say too much, but I'm working on something in somewhat of a similar space, which I can't believe. But we'll see how that goes and if I can emotionally handle that. But I'm working on a project right now, and that's about all I can say.
Okay. And Maiken, what's next for you? I know you're both of you are busy, but I know you're especially busy. We've had a few of the docs that you've executive produced on the podcast, so your name comes up regularly. But what's next for you?
So I have a film that's coming out tomorrow at the IFC called Tantura, which I produced, which is about the Israeli-Palestinian war in 1948. And then I'm developing 2 other feature docs, which again, I can't really talk about either because they are not in the same space as this, but they are sort of access-based. So I'm working on just developing those for the new year. But yeah, no, I think I'm going to try and stay away from the space for a while. It was a pretty dark place to be.
Yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, that's what we have. Sorry, Lisa. Yeah, no. I mean, because you are in this space, or you have been in this space a bit. How do you cope with that? Because it can be a dark place.
It's a lot, but it also can be very rewarding because there are several survivors from the first series as well as this one that I've maintained, friendships with and relationships with because they, I don't know if I have a surrogate mother look or something to me, but a lot of these women are very damaged, and for whatever reason, maybe they don't have a lot of support from their families. And because I did most of the interviews with the women, and especially in the first one, it's something that it warms my heart that I have that place in their lives. But it's a lot because some of them are still very damaged, and they can be very emotional, hot and cold, and sometimes they can take things out on you. And so anyway, but it's not the exact same space, I should say, that I'm working in, but I don't want to go too farther. I'm working on developing some other things as well that are not in that space, just for my own headspace to be okay.
Understood. Well, I think I've got to call it quits there because otherwise then I'll get wrapped on the hand for extending this any further. But it's been a pleasure to have both of you on. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for making this film, and I wish you well with all your future endeavors. Just to remind our audience, we've been talking with Maiken Baird and Lisa Bryant, co-directors of Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich. Check it out on Netflix. It's streaming now, and you'll find it most likely in the top 10 right at the front. So thanks again, and wish you all well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I also would like to thank those who helped make this podcast possible. A big shout out to Sam and Joe at Intersound Audio in York, England. A big thanks to Amy Ord, our podcast manager at Alamo Pictures, who ensures we continue getting great guests onto the show and that everything otherwise runs smoothly. Finally, a big thanks to our listeners. Many of you have been with us for 4 incredible seasons. Please keep sending us feedback and episode ideas, whether it is on YouTube, social media, or directly by email. Please also remember to like us and share us with your friends and family, wherever you happen to listen or watch podcasts. This is Factual America, signing off. You've been listening to Factual America. This podcast is produced by Alamo Pictures, specializing in documentaries, television, and shorts about the USA for international audiences. Head on down to the show notes for more information about today's episode, our guests, and the team behind the podcast. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Alamo Pictures. Be the first to hear about new productions, festivals showing our films, and to connect with our team. Our homepage is alamopictures.co.uk.